The entirety of professional sports rests on the perception of real and fair competition. That's the basis of all the narratives and belief in the system that puts eyes on screens. Without it, everything becomes at risk. Winning becomes trivialized, fandoms become disengaged, and ultimately franchises lose value. And that's why this Luka Doncic trade story is so interesting. At first glance, it's so shockingly inexplicable that it seems like an anti-competitive narrative violation in a story where we expect rational teams to be motivated primarily by winning basketball games, or at least put on the facade of doing so.
This is the worst moment in the history of my life.
One theory, for example, hypothesizes that the trade was actually motivated by a potential casino deal in Dallas. We'll touch on that later. On the spectrum of conspiracies, you have blatant cheating at one extreme. For example, Deflategate in the NFL, the Astros sign-stealing debacle in the MLB, gambling-induced match fixing in, well, every league. These are relatively straightforward cases of cheating, in the sense that there's a clear motive and perpetrator. The league officials immediately levy harsh penalties to preserve the integrity of the games and signal the values of the leagues to us, the viewers. But what about more subtle or hush-hush forms of manipulation? Think Michael Jordan's brief retirement to play baseball, likely as a gambling suspension, or the infamous Chris Paul trade to the Lakers that was vetoed for basketball reasons, likely due to small market team owner pressure. Or maybe the officiating in Game 6 of the 2002 Lakers-Kings series that was allegedly manipulated to benefit ratings and TV deals. There's a ton of examples from every sport. If you're a basketball head, it might not be so subtle. You might have a strong opinion on what really happened in each instance, but nonetheless, they exist in enough of a gray area that the league can avoid admitting wrongdoing and keep the stories in the realm of conspiracy and not objective fact. I think this Luka Doncic trade falls into this category, and while this is not a channel about sports, we'd like to explain and overanalyze things here, so we'll look at the concept of Kayfabe applied to the NBA and the balancing act between sport and business. And to be clear, the point of this video isn't even about this particular trade, nor the casino conspiracy. I'm an average NBA fan who has nothing to add on the basketball mechanics behind this deal, other than the trite takes regurgitated from the latest NBA subreddit post. And frankly, even most people in the NBA seem as confused as we are.
It's a lot more digging somebody got to do to find out why he got traded, because you don't just trade him at 25. He just went to the finals, you know what I'm saying?
So we'll have to wait for more information to come out to really understand the trade. Maybe there are good basketball reasons to justify it for the Mavs that we just don't have information on yet. This video, though, is a commentary on the narrative control that establishments like the NBA have to maintain to keep the reality of the product intact. Kayfabe is a term that came out of professional wrestling, and it's the illusion that everything that happens in pro wrestling is real, even when the outcomes and play-by-plays are basically scripted and predetermined. It's an open secret that's not really a secret because everybody's kind of in on it. Modern WWE fans know that it's a scripted show, and the WWE doesn't really try to hide it anymore. But we're willing to suspend our disbelief for the sake of entertainment. I would argue that the same concept, albeit on a very different and subtle level, applies to the NBA. The analogy falls a little flat at first glance, because obviously players on the court are playing real basketball. I completely believe that at any given tip-off, it could be anyone's game. LeBron James is really LeBron James and not a character he's playing, obviously. The coaching staff are doing real research and drawing up real plays. The passion and emotion when a team wins a championship is real. The games aren't scripted or influenced. Well, except those few times when gambling was involved. Or maybe that time when the league might have wanted to eke out a Game 7 for more viewership, or favor a big market team, or not disadvantage a mid-market team, or favor a smaller market team because the bigger markets were getting too big. So sure, the games themselves aren't literally scripted, and only in rare situations do individuals put in minor fixes, like rigging some calls and manipulating some stats for gambling. But the NBA ecosystem that surrounds these games, the trades, the drafts, the salary caps, the revenue sharing, they all operate within controlled parameters that bend to the business interests of the NBA. And as long as everyone abides by the narrative, everyone keeps making money. And as long as everyone keeps making money, the more they reinforce the narrative.
Damn, who knew? All the planes we flew, good things we've been through.
And that takes us back to the Doncic trade. Let's assume for a moment that trading a generational talent entering his prime for an injury-prone center who's seen his best days is a trade that no reasonable GM would make at face value. To quote The Ringer, there is no basketball reason to make a trade like this, whether you're desperate to win the title this season or trying to stay competitive for the next 10. It's no wonder that everyone is completely baffled. If you're trading for the purity of competition and winning, then it is incredibly hard to justify. Now, zooming back out. If you're in the NBA establishment, which I would include to be all direct and extended NBA personnel, as well as mainstream NBA media and partners, then you're going to cover this trade within the parameters of acceptable basketball discourse. And that's to go over all the basketball reasons, like Luka's conditioning, attitude, playstyle, stats, his weight, Anthony Davis's defensive fit, how he fits into the Mavs schemes, Contract extensions, supermax contracts, draft picks, championship contention. There are a million things that the basketball media is going crazy with. But the vast majority of it all falls within the acceptable bounds of the capital N narrative for the NBA. So then what is out of bounds? To directly challenge the integrity of the sport or otherwise make it not about basketball would be out of bounds. And I think to do so as an NBA insider would get you blackballed by the league. And that's why this theory by Texas lawyer Chris Cradaville is so interesting. To summarize, he claims that the Mavericks' new ownership group, who have a stake in the Sands casinos, have long been trying to build a casino in Texas, but failed to get a bill passed that would have approved it. So to better make their case, they want the Mavs to be in a weakened position so that they can make the threat of moving the franchise to another city. Therefore, they purposely took a bad trade to put the franchise in a delicate position they could then use as leverage to get the casino bill through in the future. Is this theory credible at all? I have no idea, but I did see a former part owner of the Warriors retweet it among a chorus of others, so I don't think it's just a baseless throwaway theory. My broader point, though, is that I would be very surprised if any notable media outlet picked up the story because it frames the trade as blatantly serving ulterior motives and sacrificing the purity of the sport. And that is not in the realm of acceptable discourse by the NBA. A Stephen A. Smith type can talk circles around stats and synergies and whether a player wants to win enough, but it would be taboo for them to touch a theory like this one because it violates the narrative. It goes too deep on the business and doesn't anchor on the ballgame. It burns the goodwill of the fans and doesn't help anyone on the inside. The media needs the NBA to do well in order to have stories to tell, and the NBA needs the media to tell its stories. Now, you can be Dwayne Wade, who talked about the trade in a business light, mentioning that the league wants Luka to help internationalize the sport, improve jersey sales, and all that. And yeah, that speaks to profit motives, but it's still completely in the realm of kayfabe because it doesn't question the integrity of the sport. Even in the cases that mainstream outlets do talk about sensitive subjects, be it criminal or civil cases that players are involved in, or other serious scandals, it's not done in a retributive or investigative way, but in a we're on the side of the viewer way. I might not be explaining my thoughts on this part very well, and let me know if it doesn't make any sense, but this is certainly the feeling I get when I watch sports coverage. I get WWE vibes when I watch people debate on SportsCenter. And I'm not saying that it's necessarily a bad thing. I mean, I personally love it. I eat it up. But nonetheless, I do have to suspend my disbelief a little bit when doing so.
They traded a 2025 Mercedes G-Wagon in exchange for a 2015 Pathfinder.
This also bubbles up to a separate story with the NBA, which is that some people are saying that viewership, ratings, and franchise valuations are starting to decline. To corroborate that, look at what the smart money in the NBA is doing. By smart money, I mean the billionaire owners who have recently sold their stakes in team ownership. Two prime examples come to mind: Mark Cuban, former owner of the Mavs, and Chamath Palihapitiya, a former minority owner of the Warriors. When you believe that an asset's value is growing fast and that its best days are ahead of it, you usually keep holding, not sell. So why did they sell? In both examples, these owners' public statements about their sales were very generic and positive. It's kind of like when you leave a job and do an exit interview, you're usually better off not ruffling any feathers and just going out quietly. If not to leave on good terms, to just not cause any drama. Mark Cuban framed his sale as leaving it in better hands. He mentions that the new owners with their real estate background would better suit the future growth of the franchise. Very diplomatic comment. On the Warriors side, Chamath didn't point to any specific reason other than mostly expressing his gratitude for the experience. So all said, it was a very quiet departure. And most NBA fans probably have no idea who he is anyways. Both of these guys made a ton of money. They got in early and exited arguably at peak valuations. One of them, Mark Cuban, is super high profile and is still involved. He's part of the NBA machine, so I don't think he can really even say anything controversial, especially about this Luka trade. Chamath's side, though, is where it gets really interesting. He tweeted yesterday that I sold my ownership in the Warriors last year, in part because I was pretty sure competition for the NBA was coming, a la LIV Golf versus PGA. The speculated antics below, he's referring to the Chris Cradaville casino theory, only reinforced the likelihood that a group of well-heeled investors with $5 to $10 billion could quickly stand up a competitor to the NBA. After this trade, they may want to start with Luka and pay him his supermax and get LeBron by making him the commissioner. I thought this was really insightful. This is the type of juicy insider deliberation that I think us fans rarely ever get to see because we just don't really have any privileged information. Is there really a competing basketball league in the works? Are NBA insiders aware of this, and are some owners selling in anticipation? Is that why the Mavs ownership group are willing to sacrifice the Mavs to hedge their casino bet? Who knows? And who knows how many other stories like this are buried because they're narrative violations. The NBA would never sanction takes like this because they need to protect their business. And if Chamath was still an owner, of course he wouldn't be able to say stuff like this publicly. So to round this video out, what does this tell us? The NBA, like any massive entertainment business, operates on multiple levels. There's the product we see, the basketball, the drama, the storylines that ESPN feeds us daily. And then there's the business reality underneath, the backroom negotiations, the franchise machinations, the long-term business planning that we rarely get glimpses of. Maybe the genius of the NBA's Kayfabe isn't just that it maintains the illusion of pure competition, it's that it doesn't even seem like there's any illusion to begin with. And maybe I'm overthinking, and this is just how everything works. Or maybe there's a bit of Kayfabe in everything. At the end of the day, though, the media gets their storylines, the players get their highlights, and the owners get their business deals. Everyone stays in their lane, everyone makes money, and the machine keeps running. And I sure as hell will be there with my dollar to keep enjoying the show.
Did you know? Yes.